Welcome on in, Go fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop live stream for round 4 at the Fedex St Jude Championship. Going to make sure you have all the information that you need to go out there, have yourself a day for out there for props and on the showdown side of things, and go out there and hopefully bank your GPP or two and go out there and cash out on a few props. First off, hopefully your Saturday is treating you guys nicely. Whether you're hanging at home, you have some plans for later, and nice of you to stop on by and talk some golf out there for tomorrow. So if there's any questions that you've got for either DFS or over there for props, feel free to go ahead and fire down in chat. But as you guys know, we'll start off with a look at the weather. We'll talk about the golf course, some of the changes that we saw out there for Saturday, and then how that impacts play. First off, from the showdown perspective, and a few players that I've got my eye on. And then afterwards is when we'll talk through the stat averages and then everything over there in Underdog, Prize Picks, Pick 6. So if you've been here a while, you probably know what to expect, but just want to make sure to set the table for anyone that is new here. And right off the bat, go out there and smash the like button for your boy. Whether you're watching this on replay, whether you're somebody already down there in the live chat, we'd love to have you. And let's go ahead and get on after it. Got Samuel down there, first to comment down there in the live stream, always a regular over there in the channel. Hopefully you're having a fantastic evening and are ready to get after this stuff. So first off, want to mention our presenting sponsor for the live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation. They've been sponsoring this segment for the last 3-4 months, and they are a great resource for all of your DFS needs. Here we talk about the golf aspect, right? We talk about DFS, all of that sort of stuff. But over on the Ship It Nation, they've got you covered regardless of what sport that you're playing. So for example, in 15 minutes, we have the UFC slate locking, something that I'll be keeping an eye on over my shoulder. I've got actually the fights ready to bring up. We're also talking about football in a few weeks. They've got hockey, NBA, all those different sports covered over there. So if you're not just playing golf, if you're adding in some of that exposure, definitely something that you guys want to check out. So code Luke10 over there will give you a discount off any monthly or yearly membership over there, and gives a little kickback to the channel here as well. So make sure to check them out. Great resource again for sports outside of golf. They have golf on there too, of course, but it's a more encompassing site, and they're not going to charge an arm and a leg like some other sites out there. It is much more reasonable and run by great guys, a great group of content creators over there, led by guys like Tambo and Hoop. But let's talk about this golf course, which today you probably noticed played a whole lot more difficult. That was unexpected. The books didn't see that coming. I did not expect to see that out there at moving day, and a lot of it was pin location based. The putts were extremely hard to hole, and you probably noticed if you were on Shot Tracker today that those 6 to 8 footers, which are normally like 60-70%ers for tour pros, were getting missed all over the place. Tommy Fleetwood, somebody we mentioned on the stream, could not buy a putt for his life, something that has been unfortunately a reality for him in all 3 rounds at this point. Justin Thomas had dart after dart and just could not convert from like 4 or 5 feet out. I think you were just dealing with a very devilish setup, something that we haven't seen for quite some time, where just by choosing some real slopey locations, they made the golf course play an entire shot harder. Because from the weather perspective, maybe the wind direction was a little bit different, but it was the same intensity. Course maybe firming up ever just a little bit, but most of that had to be course setup. So the par 3s played a little bit longer out there for round 3, and also I think you were on some real slopey spots. In terms of round 4, the weather looks a lot of the same. So if you take a look at the weather forecast, it's going to be in that 8 to 12 mile an hour range, just like it was for most of today's round. You also have wind gusts that are in that 15 to 20 mile an hour range for most of the round. The one thing that will be different out there on Sunday, or at least we're assuming is going to be different out there for tomorrow, is that they're going to be doing 2-sums instead of 3-sums. On the different weather forecasts that we have available, it doesn't look like there's as high a chance of having those thunderstorms come through. So I would imagine that you see a little bit of an adjustment from the tour. Again, they could completely throw a wrench into this and tell us that we're doing 3-sums once again. But for the time being, I'm assuming that they're going to start with the bottom of the leaderboard and send them off of hole number 1. So if that were to be the case, maybe the earliest of starters that are starting around probably 7 a.m. local time could see an advantage for their first 4 or 5 hours. But unless you're taking the very early players out there, by the way, the ones that have played some real nasty golf to this point, some of which, like a Jordan Spieth, Homa, Rory McIlroy, for example, have had some of the worst form that we've ever seen from them. So there are some options early. Maybe they do see a slight advantage, but it is worth remembering that this is a Sunday showdown slate and that you're going to have some placement points as well. So even though I do think that the very early starters are intriguing when it comes to the weather angle, you're still going to have to mix in guys that have a later tee time. A lot of that to try and get those placement points that you'll need in GPPs. But for that leverage, which you're also going to need in those kind of contests, you got to find some sort of spot to actually move up the leaderboards, some sort of spot to make sure you're not duplicating yourself with a bunch of different lineups. Well, that's where the early guys are going to come in handy. So it's not the kind of slate like round 2 where we went out there and just only played the morning starters and printed money. This one's a lot more nuanced, but you do have a little bit of that same kind of factor coming through. So we'll circle back to this when we talk through props later. Will be especially important to talk about the scoring average and stuff. But in general, we haven't seen the pin locations. It's going to be tough to know ahead of time, but I'm assuming it might actually play easier out there for Sunday. The reason for that, again, was the really tricky setup that they had for round 3, which breaks a lot of trends that they go with out there on tour. A lot of times for round 3, it's the easiest of the 4 setups. And today, based on what I saw from the eye test, it may have actually been the hardest of the 4 setups out there today. So definitely threw a wrench into things. My showdown day today was mediocre at best. And for the prop side, Live Golf actually went really well today. Played even easier than what we had for round 1, so that was great. But this scoring average differential did not do me any favors, to say the very least. So I was a little bit thrown off by that. Definitely pissed off some guys like Sam Burns. You could see it with him snapping his driver. The course was pretty brutal out there. It's not like it played super hard, right? No holes other than hole 18 that were playing like close to a third of a stroke over par. But nothing was super easy out there either, right? Like even the birdie holes, like holes 1 and 2, we're still only playing like 0.13 and 0.17 strokes under par. So it was, again, something that was very different than days 1 and 2. I think if anything, round 4, it's going to be closer to round 3, but maybe slightly easier. I'd say maybe about a half a stroke under par, maybe like 0.6 strokes under par is where I'd put the scoring average for round 4. Let's go over to the DFS side. Let's talk through some of my top options for Sunday, which again, this isn't to give you guys a player pool out there for tomorrow, but more so to show you what I'm looking for in players. You should have your own process. You should have your own convictions around the players that you're using. And you shouldn't just be using somebody because you hear some Joe Schmo on the internet, right, telling you what to go out there and do. Now, it might be me, it might be somebody else that you're using for your content. You ideally should have a little bit of your own process in there, right? A hand in going out there and determining your own destiny. And what I am going to show you with the guys I have down here as a yes are some guys you could consider, I suppose, right? If you agree with what I say, by all means, go out there, use them yourself. But more importantly, why I'm taking certain players. And as I was kind of hinting at when we talked about the weather there, you're going to have a mix of some chalk, and you're going to have some mix of some guys that are a little bit lower owned. Your chalk is where you're going to get your placement points. They don't necessarily have to be guys starting in the top 5, but ideally, if they have a ceiling round, guys that can finish in that top 5 and top 10, you're going to want at least 3 of those players in every single lineup. Maybe even 4 out there in large field GPPs. And then those last 2, maybe 3 spots that you have left over are where you're going to take some of the mid to early starters. Those players are going to be drastically low owned in the top end of the board because with those placement points in play, everyone tries to jam in those same chalky players. So guys like Hideki, Zalatoris, all those guys that are like -6, -7 or better are going to be double, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times higher owned than the players that they have around them. You can't completely ignore those guys, right? They're, donkey chalk if they were on any sort of other slate. You have to include a few because of the placement points, but your lineup can't be all of those sort of options. If you do that sort of lineup, you're going to duplicate a million times in the big field GPPs. And even in single entries where you might not duplicate yourself a whole bunch, you're going to be dealing with a lack of leverage. Just know players that when you get them right, you're going to truly move up those leaderboards. So like you said, you have to find a fine balance between taking some of those placement points and then not going overboard with it, trying to find 2, maybe even 3 players as pivots that go out there, give you that leverage, and to try and lock in a little bit of that weather aspect as well. So just wanted to say that right off the bat, set the tone for the kind of players that we're going to go through. And you'll see that there's going to be some chalk, right? Like a Scotty, I point out, a Victor Hovland, a Tony Finau that is starting in the mix, but a lot of these low-round options as well. So we're going to talk about Tommy Fleetwood here in a minute. Rest in peace, any lineups that used him today that did not turn out so well. And then there's going to be like pivots like a Sahith. There's going to be pivots like a Davis Thompson that I want to point out. But then chalky guys like an Akshay, right? Guys with higher ownership that are mixed in to give you a taste of the, both sides of the equation. The guys I'm using as conviction plays, and then the guys I'm using to get a little bit different. Let's catch up on chat, see if there's any questions, and then move on to these plays. So where are we at? We had, let's see, bring the 18-wheeler tomorrow for ship day. Yeah, not sure what you're saying there, Samuel, but if you're saying the guys that are like 50 to 60 to try and move up, I'm right there with you. I think that's what you're saying, and there might be something to that. Today played a lot harder. Was it because of the weather? No, weather was pretty much the same. So I think a lot of that was the pin location setup, which was, again, surprisingly hard. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Sanjay couldn't putt either. Same thing as Fleetwood. Yeah, it's sometimes those guys that can't putt, right, continue to not putt. But when they figure that thing out, watch out. So that's why I'm going to talk about Fleetwood here in a few minutes. I think that there's some reason for positivity there. That's for sure. What's going on? Michael says, cheers to the 4th round. Cheers to you here with my water. Hopefully I didn't unplug my mic with knocking that thing over. Just chilling tonight. Going to be watching the UFC fight. So in fact, in 3 minutes, I've got to remind myself to update over here on the left and bring up the ESPN Plus thing because I've got a lot of money on the line tonight. So played a bunch of DFS lineups, put in a bunch of bets. I've got some buddies coming over to sweat out the fights. So we're going to be good until about 7:15 for the live stream. So we should have a full hour out there for you guys. But yeah, afterwards, we're watching some fights, so it'll be a lot of fun. Let me make this full screen so you guys can see the projection, see this spreadsheet a little bit better. And let's hop on into this thing. If you guys have any guys who want my complete take on any like specific players, whether it be like an ownership question, whether it be something about the pros and cons of using them out there for Sunday, now's the time to go ahead and throw those down in chat. I'll periodically go back to the live chat, see what you guys are talking about down there. And if there are any players you want me to circle back on, just let me know. But there's going to be a lot that we talk about here, more than usual when it comes to the highlighted plays. So let's go through these rather quickly. You're not going to spend as much time on each player as a result. But let's start with Scotty Scheffler at $12,700. We've seen him in this position before. We saw him at the Olympics do this. We've seen him multiple times this year go from like 4 or 5 shots back to go out there to win an event. Now, he's 7 shots back of Hideki, which I think is going to be next to impossible to overcome. But if he goes out there, he shoots like -5, -6, you're going to have him out there in the large field GBP. And the one thing I know about Scotty is that he doesn't back down on Sundays. And even at a crazy price tag like this, even at like 30% ownership, I would argue that there's really no spot where you have to fade Scotty. And I don't think there's ever a spot where you have to play him as well, right? He's, appropriately owned, I think at about 30%. If you choose not to play Scotty Scheffler up top, there are also guys that you can mix in as well. So personally, I wanted to point out why I'm playing Scotty. Tee to green stats have been fantastic, particularly rounds 2 and 3. Guy has been hitting the ball to 10, 15 feet. Round 2 made quite a few putts, not as much as round 1. Today could not buy a putt for his life. So I like buying the dip on a player like Scotty Scheffler, that if he had gone out there and putt today, he would have been 13, 14, maybe even further under par if he was out there making putts today. And if that were the case, he'd probably be like 40, maybe even 50% owned. So I think that you're getting him at a pretty reasonable ownership number. Again, I don't think he's a must play or somebody that you have to avoid. If you are going to avoid him up top, you got Xander there. I'd say Xander a little bit lower owned than what you're going to have there with Scotty. I've got Xander closer to like 21, 22% ownership. It's also $1,500 cheaper. So I totally get the argument for going in that direction. reason, but I guess just for the transparency's sake here in the live stream, I am going with Scotty over Xander. I just can't fit both into my lineups. I still want to get some sort of leverage out there on Scotty. It's not going to be a full 2x out there in my 150 max, and I'm playing about 50% Scotty. So I'm going to have a lot of lineups that are starting with a $12,700 golfer, which is going to force my hand a little bit when it comes to the 6K range. So I'm totally fine with that. I think that it's a slate where there are some 6K guys that are live, particularly because we've got some high upside birdie makers down there that are starting with, not in all cases like a super early tee time, but if we're getting those two sums off of hole number one, again, like I'm expecting, and until we get news otherwise, I'm going to treat it like that. Those sort of players that are teeing off early, there's enough with upside in the 6K range that I'm okay getting to a Scotty Scheffler. So again, up top, you've got some options. Hideki Matsuyama at 10 grand would be an option as well. The one thing to note is that he's going to be nearly 50% owned. And in fact, in single entry contests, in some of your higher dollar stuff, you could be looking at like a 65% owned Hideki Matsuyama. So you could argue that that is just going to be crazy ownership, something that you want to go out there and avoid. Whereas Scotty at like 33%, I think just a little bit more reasonable chalk. So for me, the one guy I'm splurging on up there up top would be Scotty Scheffler. I'm avoiding a lot of the other guys up there, so I'll just say it right now. The only guy 10K plus that I'm using is going to be Scotty, and I'm going to have a lot of lineups because I'm not locking Scotty out there for tomorrow that are starting down here in the 9K range. And if I choose to take the opposite sort of build, right, don't take premier spend up option like a Scotty Scheffler, then I have no business down there in the 6K range. If I'm starting a lineup with somebody like a Fleetwood, maybe it would be like a Morikawa, a Victor Hovland down here at $9,300. I could live in the 7K range for some of my last few guys in, and I'm going to have no issues out there with my salary. So I kind of like that aspect of it. Showdown pricing is normally pretty soft to begin with, but if you avoid the top end range, which this is one of the few slates where I see myself doing that a little bit, you're going to have pretty much all the money you want to spend on players, whether it's loading up on some 8K guys, living in the top end of the 7K range, or some of your last, 3, 4, 5, fifth man in, that sort of situation, you're going to be totally fine to go with whatever kind of lineup build that you want. So I just want to point that out from the lineup construction perspective as the balanced lineup, where like a Ludwig's your second man in if you want to. Tony Finau is going to be pretty chalky, but he's only $8,900. At Tom Kim's $8,600. Billy Ho's in position for some placement points is also down here at like $8,300. There are enough guys, and not all of them have placement point potential. Like we're going to talk about Tom Kim, who's he's probably not going to top 5, right? Starting at -2, that are just quality players for the price tag that mostly, especially for mean slates, would probably be like $600 to $700 more expensive. So I like the pricing. I think especially if you get a little bit more balanced about it, you can fit in 3, 4 guys up top that you really like that normally you'd have no business fitting into the same lineup. Let's talk about the Tommy Fleetwood play. I kind of already hinted at why I like him. The guy just cannot make a putt for his life. He's an absolute animal with the ball striking, as he has been for most of the year. At the Olympics, he was able to flip the switch with the flat stick, but has not been able to figure it out there for this week. So he's usually really good on Bermuda grass. He's from South Florida, so very familiar out there on the surface. So something that I want to potentially consider out there in my lineups, and something I wanted to point out there. So let's move on to our next play. We got Victor Hovland at $9,300. He's 18.9% owned. He's -11, so starting up there in the top 5. And for some reason, maybe I'm going to be wrong on this ownership number, I don't have him as crazy high owned. Maybe it's the Hideki Matsuyama factor over there at $10,000. Maybe it's Tony Finau, a Sam Burns down there at -10. That are taking ownership away at just a little bit cheaper. But an 18.9%, even if it's like a 25% on Victor Hovland, is very reasonable. And he's the sort of player that when he gets hot, when he figures out his form, is usually able to continue it going forward. Now, Sunday has been a pain point out there for Victor Hovland. He's not always the most consistent player finishing out a golf tournament, but I'll roll the dice on him a little bit. I will say, if you want to fade Sunday Hovland, then by all means go out there and do so. You will be taking out probably 20, maybe, hopefully 19% of ownership. Like I have him out there exactly. But at the same time, it's not like you have to get different up top, right? I want to point out some guys you can get for leverage, like a Tommy Fleetwood, for example. Tony Finau won't be a leverage play. Tom Kim will be a player that gets you a little bit different to the field. But up top, especially with the Sunday placement points, I think if you're going to make a conviction play, if you're going to take some chalk, the best place to do it are with your spend ups, with guys that are world-class players that are more consistent than their counterparts down there in the 6 and 7K range. And while there will be, the off chance that I get to a guy like an Akshay, a Will Zalatoris is relatively chalky out there for tomorrow as well. Like those sort of guys down low, right? Maybe a splurge on 1-2 pieces of higher owned players, but a majority of the guys that I'm taking in 35 to 40% of lineups are going to be up here towards the middle to top end of the board. So if Victor Hovland would fit that description, form has been very consistent across almost all 4 stat categories up there into the green, which is something that he hasn't done for quite some time. So I like that for Big Dick Vic, as some would call him. And let's catch up a chat and catch our breath here for a second. Which, speaking of, I'm going to see if I can get these UFC fights up, which the first fight should be starting here rather soon. So I want to make sure we can get that going over here. There it is, over there at ESPN Plus, which, by the way, ESPN Plus, not a shill, I'm not sponsored by them, is ridiculous value for what you end up getting from them, right? If you're like a golf fan, an MMA fan, whatever the case is there, they've got you covered for most UFC fights, especially like the fight cards, and then obviously all the golf shit they do. All right, for some reason it won't load. I'm not going to take too much time doing that, but let's see where we left off. What's going on, Luke? Big day tomorrow. Let's get it. Absolutely. I would love to have that. Adesanya for the knockout. I've got to say that I think that he's primed. He's pissed off. That's for damn sure. He's angry out there at Duplessis. Or Duplessis, however you say the last name. I'm looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun. It's one with a lot of bad blood. I think it'll be close, right? Betting line would indicate that as well. I've heard a lot of people that are sharp bettors say that DDP is going to steamroll him, but there's the GOAT factor with Izzy, right? A lot of people think he's one of the greatest in the division of all time. We'll have to see. It'll be a lot of fun. Sabrina, who, by the way, is one of my buddy's girlfriends down there, said, Luke, pull up to the Turkish food. And that's Forbes who said that on Sabrina's phone. Oh, my God. What's going on, buddy? I'm doing this right now, or else I would, dude. What's going on, Antonio? You were watching Clark's second round after he missed the 9-footer for birdie, and he said he can't read these greens. Yeah, interesting. I'm sure some guys will complain after the fact. There's probably a lot of guys that'll say that same sort of thing. Like Denny, for example, said that about Sedgefield Country Club. At the Wyndham, he was gaining all those strokes ball striking, but couldn't make a putt for his life. The thing is, though, if you look at all the other years for Denny at Sedgefield, he seems to know how to read the greens then. So it seems like a very convenient excuse that these players make if you're going out there and not having their best stuff. They'll be like, oh, the greens are hard to read, or like, oh, it hit a spike mark, or oh, the grain took it one direction or the other. I'm sure that there's some sliver of truth out there, but if there's one thing that tour players know how to do, it's how to make excuses. It's how to go out there, put the blame on anyone but themselves, because they've got fragile egos. They're golfers. They are players that depend on confidence to go out there and perform at their best. So you can't blame them for trying to protect that confidence a little bit. And those are the coping mechanisms that golfers will use to do so. So again, there's some truth to the things that players say, but a lot of times it's just that. It's like coach speak in football, right? There's stuff that just coaches just have to say for the sake of it out there. And a lot of that is mental out there for it's either themselves. A lot of times they're players out there when it comes to like football coach speak, but it's a thing in all sports. That's for sure. And I'm sure other people like myself, like touts, do that same bullshit all the time. I'm not completely innocent in that either. Let's move on a little bit further. So Tony Finau, $8,900. Whatever the thing is, I mean, ball striking is there. You'd expect to see that from Tony. He's been a much better putter this week. And I pointed that out as why he was a decent round 2 showdown play. Is round 1, he went out there and gamed with the flat stick. And while he's not been like lighting it up on the greens, right? It's not like he's like number 1 in shots gained putting. it's been rather impressive for Tony Finau, especially with how shitty he's been for the last 6-7 months with the flat stick. So $8,900, -7 is not a flashy score by any means, but you go out there, you have a ceiling round to like 4 or 5 under. That's a top 5 finish right there, and potentially even better than that. If you can go out there and shoot something just a little bit better, potentially even has top 3 upside. So I like where he's positioned. I like the shots gained metrics, showing me a little bit with that flat stick, which is required around this kind of golf course. This isn't a major championship sort of setup. This isn't a long golf course where he's going to completely overpower it with his ball striking, but rather he's going to have to go out there and make some 10 to 15 footers to pay off, which is far from a guarantee. But I do like what we've seen so far, right? He's given at least me a little bit of optimism to go out there and still play him. And I think the price tag and ownership is at least enough in check where I'll mix him into a few lineups. In terms of getting a little bit different, and it's not like these two guys are going to be royally underowned, but I've got Tom Kim at about 12.3%, and then we've got Billy Ho here at $8,300, and he's at about 11.9% projected ownership. So both right about 12%, which is a little bit of a step down from like the 18 to maybe 20% that you're going to see on a Tony Finau and a Victor Hovland, but it's a low enough ownership number where if you mix in a slightly lower owned guy here, right, your 6-7K players, you find maybe 2 guys that are sub 7% owned down there, but that's going to give you the leverage you need for large field GPPs. And I guess I point that out to show you that it's not rocket science, right? You don't have to go out there and completely overdo things and take like 4 guys that are sub 5%. That would be completely overdoing it out there for round 4. But rather, if it's just like one guy that's 10 to 12%, and maybe 2 guys that are sub 7% owned, that is likely all you have to do, even in the largest of large field GPPs, to go out there and find some success. So this guy down there, by the way, who insists on talking about Rory just got sent to Bandland. But these sort of players are the guys that you can use for some leverage, right? You don't have to get too different about it out there. And these 2 players are decent options. Tom Kim, for example, very solid ball striking. Today just could not buy a putt for his life. Made nothing from 10 to 15 feet. Also had a few misses from 8 feet and in, which is very uncharacteristic. He's usually a much more consistent putter than what we've seen so far this week. And $8,600, a fair price tag for a guy who was maybe the most popular bet this week. Out there on Monday, I saw a million different cards out there of people going out there and playing him. So yeah, something that I wanted to point out there. Also, Billy Horschel at -7. He's the kind of player that I loved hitting into the week. It was a core play for me. Also in position. So kind of like Tony Finau, he's there at -7. But because Sam Burns is in this range and he's -10, you've got your Cantlays, your Finaus, even a little bit cheaper. You've got players like a Denny, a Wyndham Clark that are taking away a little bit of ownership. You don't have Billy as high owned as he probably should be. If you didn't have as many options that had placement point potential, you'd probably have Billy Ho at 15 to 18% ownership, but rather now I've got him just a little bit more reasonably owned. So that's why I think he's an option that you can use, maybe not for leverage in this range, but definitely as a punt with the ownership, right? You're not going to take a crazy chalky option right there, but rather just kind of move on to live to a next spot, right? You're going to have maybe 1-2 other chalky guys in your lineup, one guy medium owned like you have with these 2, and then you can use 1-2 other spots to go and get different. We don't want to bring up the negative things. Truly sad as golf fan to see what's happening with Homa. He's confirmed broken. I agree with that. Yeah, it's shitty to see. I mean, what happened to Rory today too was shitty to see. Jordan Spieth having a bad week. Part of that is the no cut event aspect. Like guys just give up. They don't care. But Max Homa, it's not just this week. Like you could say that Jordan's had a few good events, right? He got into contention at the John Deere. Like that's gives us some breadcrumbs for success. Guys like Rory, I mean, almost won multiple majors. So, he's not too far off, obviously. But Max Homa, other than the Masters this year, I mean, he finished 3rd at that event. Credit where credit's due. That's fantastic stuff. But outside of that, it's been a lot of missed cuts. It's been, even when he's making cuts, finishing in like 45th place. So yeah, I understand what you're saying about not wanting to bring it up. Like it's shitty to see, but it's true. And this isn't going to help. Like he's not going to make it to the second leg of the playoffs unless there's some sort of miracle out there. And he better be working on his game the next 2-3 months, because I do not think that he's going to make it to that President's Cup team. As of right now, if I were the captain out there, I'm assuming he's not making it automatically on points. Even if he was in like 8th or 9th place, I would not take him over there to Montreal. It just seems like a liability out there with the format. I hate to say it, hate to be negative about Homa because he's one of the best guys out there, but you're right. It's it's a tough scene out there. That's for damn sure. And Jordan too, right? You could say it's the injury with Jordan, right? There's like almost a reason for it, so it doesn't feel as shitty. Max Homa, what's going on? Like, is he injured? Is he just dealing with some sort of a swing issue right now? It's definitely doesn't look pretty. Let's talk about some of the 7K players I like here, though. So Sahith Theegala is at -3, so he's not going to get you like top 5 placement points, but he's also a quality player that you're getting at sub 10% ownership that kills it in the showdown format. He'll have a blow-up hole from time to time, a blow-up round out there over 72 holes, but Sahith Theegala has some of the higher horsepower of any player on tour. He's a very streaky player, one of the best putters on tour when he's out there with his best stuff, and the kind of guy that I'll play for round 4 showdown, right? Even without a lot of that placement point potential, he's the sort of guy that I could see going out there and finding some success. So I do want to see if I can get these fights up. I'm assuming this fight's starting about now. Usually it's about 15 minutes after they start the card. It's saying I'm not signed in. Okay, so let me, I guess I'll have to sign in over here real quick. 1 second. I'll bring up chat. If you guys have any questions, hit me with them right now. So it's a good time for that, as I'll be doing this over there on the side. But I want to be able to watch this fight on the side while we do this, because like I said, I have quite a bit on these fights, and I played more for DFS than I normally do because I thought there was a little bit of an edge for this slate, particularly with some of like the last 3-4 fights. I thought ownership was very inefficient, especially on some of the guys that I wanted to play. So I don't want to completely tip my hand because I don't want to jinx them here, but some of the leverage I got, and I should probably check on where they actually came in ownership-wise, but a lot of the guys I was getting in theory for leverage were like, it was fantastic. Let's put it this way. I had guys like 3-4 times lower owned in my projections based on where I had their optimal rate. So, okay, we got the fight up. Enough of that over there. And it looks like it's still round 1, so we didn't miss that much. And the guy that I want to win is currently on top in a chokehold. So he's winning the position, but he's also in a submission right now. I have pieces of the both sides of that fight. I have Aguilar in like 30% as a little bit of a value play. And then the Nicole guy, he has a very high finish rate. If you take a look at his starts before this UFC, I believe this is his first UFC fight, if memory serves me correctly. Looks like he might be out. Yep, look at that. So the value fight won, actually. So I had about 35% of both. I had 70% of that fight overall, and the cheaper guy ended up getting the finish. So I know I said I wanted the Nicole guy to win, but actually I think we got a better outcome with the cheaper guy getting a finish. So, okay, good shit there. I guess it depends on ownership. If that Aguilar guy was as low owned as what I'm hoping for, that was a pretty good outcome right there. But let's move on a little bit further. So we got Akshay at $7,500. I'm taking him starting at -7. He's one of the chalkier guys in this range that I'm playing, but he's not mega chalky. So, he's close to the top end of the board, but he is somebody that is getting some attention, right? He's about 15% owned, which is about double the ownership of most players in this range, but he's not going to be like 20 to 25% like you have on guys like a Nick Dunlop. So I like Dunlop to death. He's one of my favorite players out there on tour. I've been singing his praises for long before other people out there on tour. Ever since his win, I mean, I've said this kid's a special talent. I got to see him firsthand down there in South Florida, especially like Honda Classic. Saw him make a hole-in-one down there. Just absolute world-class professional. A world-class talented player. I think a potential world #1 out there someday. Maybe not world #1. Scotty Scheffler is going to be around for a while, I'd imagine. But a top 5 in the official world golf rankings, like for sure, out there at some stage of his career. So again, I'm singing his praises out here, but he's like 25% owned. If I'm going to take a chalky guy down here, give me the Akshay Bhatia that is starting towards the top end of the board. That, in my opinion, at least right now, Akshay's the better player, right? You can argue long-term, I think Dunlop's going to be the better player between those two options. But as of right now, for tomorrow's showdown slate, give me Akshay Bhatia. And Akshay is going to be slightly lower owned and has that potential still to give you those top 5 placement points. So a lot of Sunday Showdown does come down to trying to get some of that top 5 and eventually that winner. But you need these guys like Akshay too that have the potential to shoot -5, -6, going out there and just winning the golf tournament. Like, for example, if Hideki shoots -1 and wins, that does not guarantee that he's in the optimal lineup, right? Just like if there's a guy like Nick Dunlop, for example, that shoots -2 and then finishes like 3rd place, that is not a guaranteed to be optimal, right? For example, if Akshay were to finish like 5th place, but he ends up shooting like -5 as compared to -2 with somebody like a Nick Dunlop, well, then you're going to have Akshay Bhatia out there in the large field GPP. So the placement points matter, but I do want to point that out as something that you might want to adjust for, right? Like it's not all about the placement points. You do have to have some of them, but when somebody's like double the ownership of somebody around them, and there's still legit play that might go off, I'd rather have the lower owned option. Denny losing 5 strokes tee to green. Yeah, dude, he's doing it all at the putter, which, by the way, at Sedgefield was the exact opposite. He lost like 3.5 shots gained putting that week, but he had gained like 5 strokes out there tee to green, and now it's the complete opposite. So I think it says a lot out there about just golf in general, right? About Showdown and whatnot, and it's crazy. Is Jason Day back? Oh, that's a great question. Mr. Malbon is my nickname for him. Fantastic sponsorship that he decided to take on. I love Malbon stuff myself, but I guess if we take a look at the shots gained metrics, I can give you a decent idea. He's gaining with both ball striking categories, gaining about 0.88 strokes off the tee per round. He's gaining about a half a stroke approach out there per round as well. I don't know. It's a good week for him. I don't know if we can say he's completely back by any means, but definitely back this week. Brandon says, I like Hland and Burns, or depends on the tee time? So yeah, so if you're just joining us, you might want to just circle back and see my full take on things. That's probably the best way to answer your question, Brandon. So if you go to about like the 3.5 minute mark, 4 minute mark is where you'll find my take on the weather. And then yeah, Hland, a play that I talked about 5 minutes ago. I think he's playing very well this week, and he's in a good position for placement points. Burns, also relatively high owned. He's in a good spot for placement points, but both are going to be extremely high owned options. So I would be a little hesitant using them together, as then you're taking 2 like 25 to 30% owned players up top together in lineups. What I'd rather do is maybe take one of those 2 players, right? So maybe you pick your favorite out of those 2 and then mix them in with somebody that's a little bit lower owned. So I know you're just joining us. You may not have heard me talking about like a Billy Ho, a Tom Kim, for example, but maybe if you did start with, let's say, a Victor Hovland does a little bit of chalk up there, rather than taking Sam Burns as your second man in, maybe that's where you go with Tom Kim instead, right? Because, Tom Kim's going to be about half the ownership of Sam Burns. And, you could, in theory, still use Victor Hovland and a guy like Sam Burns together. It's just that you're going to have to really keep ownership in mind for your last 4 or 5 spots. So 3 or 4 spots, I suppose, would be in that kind of combination. But yeah, keep that in mind. I think they're all in play. It's just that they are going to come with inflated ownership numbers. Moving on a little bit further down the board. So we talked about Sahith. We talked about Akshay a little bit. Davis Thompson is going to be one of those diamonds in the rough. I've got him at about 4.9% projected ownership. Completely out of it when it comes to placement points. He is not going to finish top 5, top 10, but he is a world-class player that is coming in with some of the better form in the field. Win just a few weeks ago. He's been putting the absolute lights off the last few weeks. And in a 1-round sample size, give me those high upside birdie percentage players. So it's just a pure upside play. You got to hope that he goes out there and battles a little bit. And because he's not guaranteed into Eastlake, he still has a little bit of incentive to go out there and play well. So that is something to consider, is that Sunday on a no-cut event, you could have some guys go out there and quit. The best players to try and take are ones that kind of know they're going to be in the top 50. If they're just outside the top 50, I guess you could take the guys that are going to battle. But if they're in like the 60 to 70 zone and they're like in last place, I mean, just forget it. They're not going to make it to that top 50. They probably know that at this point. I'm talking about guys like a Max Homa, for example, Jordan Spieth, right, that has no chance to make it to the top 50. Those sort of players, I would be very hesitant about going out there and playing. I have a lot less hesitancy going out there and playing a Davis Thompson, right? Davis Thompson has a much better chance of finishing in that top 50. In fact, I think he's almost a lock to go out there and finish top 50. But those sort of players, they're playing for next week, right? Even if they're not going out there trying to, they're 100% out there tomorrow, it's going to be pretty damn close to it, you'd imagine, as they're trying to get momentum into next week. And any points they can muster up could be the difference into getting into that top 30 in Eastlake. Let's move on a little bit further. We also got Robert McIntyre being mixed in. He is -7, so is close enough to perhaps crack that top 10, top 5. And he's also only 9.8% owned, partially because you have guys like Dunlop that are just a little bit more expensive. Heck, even a Will Zalatoris is taking away quite a bit of ownership, and an Alex Noren here. So for Robert McIntyre, who didn't have his best stuff today, but still a player that's been very solid tee to green, a good putter here in 2024, is I think just a better player than the price tag. Is probably at least $500, $600 too cheap. And 10% ownership is, I think, lower than where he should be. So there are some chalkier players here, maybe some guys that other people would prefer, but I'd rather take the guy who's in better form than some of these other players and still has that placement point potential. A Harris English, not as much placement point potential. He's -4. So I guess in theory, he could top 15 or something like that, but it would take a hell of a round for him to get to that kind of score. In theory, I guess could top 10 even, but it would take like -7, -8. But he has one of the best course histories around TPC Southwind. So I like that for him. He's a really good Bermuda grass putter. And though he had to withdraw from his event before this, he's played to this point and he's played particularly well. So I think some of the injury concerns that I maybe had heading into the week, and I can kind of brush off a little bit now that we've seen him play. And Eric Van Rooyen is at -5. I've got him slightly higher owned than somebody like English, but also not that chalky down here in this range. So he does have some placement point potential, not a ton starting at -5. A nuclear rounds might get him close to the top 10, but more so just looking for a solid performance out of EVR. And he's been a top 25 birdie percentage player on the PGA Tour this year. He's been a player that lately has been ball striking the heck out of it. And normally the putter's been an issue for him, but has been a lot better in 2024. Austin Eckert is the last play I'm going to point out here, and he's about 3.2% owned, and definitely one of those low-owned diamonds in the rough that I'm looking for. Doesn't have placement point potential at -2, but you're going to have to get different. And because I've already got some chalk that we've talked about, like the Akshays, and I'll just say I'm playing Will Zalatoris, despite him being like 25% owned. I'm going to have some chalk in this middle, even lower tier range. We've got to have the guys like Austin Eckert as well to try and offset that ownership. And because I'm playing Scotty Scheffler, who's also nearly $13,000, well, I'm going to have to take some of these 6K range players as well. So something I wanted to point out there, Austin Eckert, really good at these short positional courses as well. He's accurate off the tee, also a much better Bermuda grass putter than he is on most other surfaces. And no surprise that he won at PGA National, which is one of my comp courses for this event. So hopefully it gives you an idea of what I'm looking for in players. And as you can see, and as I mentioned before, it's a good mix of guys that are higher owned, that have that placement point potential, and then some of those lower owned options that I'm taking to offset that ownership. I think the perfect split would be 3-3 in most lineups. It'd be 3 guys that can finish top 5, top 10, 3 guys that you're taking for some leverage, and then maybe you could go for the 4-2. It'd be 4 chalky guys and then 2 pivots out there. The 4-2 would be maybe a slightly chalkier kind of build, which you could get away with even in the large field GPPs, but your 2 pivots in a lineup with 4 chalky guys probably have to be sub 5% owned, right? They've got to be guys like an Austin Eckert. Maybe they're like 5-6% owned, like guys like a Sahith Theegala. They can't be like the Tom Kim, right? As like you're using for leverage, right? Like if he's one of your 2 quote unquote low owned players, that's probably not enough leverage out there in the large LGBP. So that's how I'm handling it. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of a game plan out there for tomorrow. Let's go ahead, build one lineup together. So I'll bring up Draftkings so we can do so, and then we'll talk about the prop side of things. So let me bring up Draftkings. I know we had one comment to cover down there, and then we'll do that and talk about some lineup construction. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well, so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Of course, next week, brand new course out there with the BMW Championship. We're going to have showdown content for that over the weekend. And because it's a brand new course, a real deep dive into what to expect from Castle Pines tomorrow. So you don't want to miss any of that. The DFS content throughout the week. And yeah, subscribe, hit that like button, as I said, and let's get after it. I know we talked about Clark, but what are my thoughts? So he's primed for a -5, -6 round. I kind of get what you're saying. I think he is due for some putting regression, but I like him in general just for Showdown. Like he's the kind of player I mentioned yesterday that if you're playing a single round sample size, I'll play him almost every single time. And the same thing holds up. He's got some of the better horsepower of anyone out there. And if you're going to take a chance on somebody that's a little bit lower owned, it'd be that sort of play. Now, I do have him still getting some steam because people are catching on to the kind of player that Wyndham Clark is and why he's such a good showdown play in particular. But I still like him, man, right? Like he's going to have his down rounds. He's going to have the rounds where he doesn't go off and have that ceiling rate, but he does it a lot more often than other players. And I want to be there for it. That's for damn sure. All right, let's build a lineup here together. So if we're building for the large field GPP, a lot of it for me doesn't have to be for you, right? Is whether I'm starting with Scotty Scheffler or not. If I'm starting with Scotty, I know it's going to force my salary down a little bit. But if I'm starting with maybe it's a Fleetwood first man in, maybe even a Victor Hovland down here at $9,300, it puts me in a completely different headspace. So I'm starting most of my builds, particularly the ones I'm doing by hand, by trying to make that decision up top. So for the sake of this lineup, we're actually going to do 2 here so I can show you the difference. Let's start off with the Scotty Scheffler. And the first thing I like to do, and I mentioned this the other day on live stream, is if I'm going to take a Scotty or somebody that's like $12,000 plus, a lot of times I like to start with my super cheap plays. So I'm going to throw in an Austin Eckert, who's cheap and doubles as a little bit of ownership leverage. I'm going to throw in a Will Zalatoris, who is not leveraged, but he is going to give us a little bit of salary savings. I'm also going to throw in a relatively low owned, let's see. So who's a decent leverage option? I guess Davis Thompson would be another one of our leverage plays. So far we've got 2 chalk, 2 leverage plays. So, I have a very balanced start for our first 4 players. Our last 2 are where we have to decide what we're going to do here. So we need at least one more guy that has placement point potential. So let's go ahead and knock that one right off the bat there. So a guy like Tony Finau probably sticks out to me as one of the better options there. So now we've got 3 chalky guys. We've got 2 pivots in this lineup. And we've got to ask ourselves what we want to do for our last man in. Whether we want to go out there, force in, and make this lineup even more different, even more leverage out there in the large field GPP, or whether we want to squeeze in more placement points. And I think a lot of this comes down to the contest you're entering. If you're in the large field GPP, this is where maybe you do want to make it a 3-3, right? Go 3 chalky guys, which you already have, and then mix in one more lower owned player to really get that leverage in a 20,000 entry sort of GPP. If we're in a single entry or a smaller contest, like we have here with the 5-5-5, then maybe we're okay taking a slightly chalkier player here. So if I was in a single entry, I'd probably lean towards McIntyre. Right? I mentioned I like McIntyre for tomorrow, and he is going to give you some placement point potential. But if I was in the large field GPP, I would highly consider an Eric Cole here. Eric Cole, another guy that I like out there for Sunday that does not have placement point potential. He's going to be like sub 5% owned, but this lineup would be 3 pivots, 3 guys that are relatively low owned, and is going to give you a ton of leverage. If guys like an Eric Cole go off for like a 4 or 5 under round, a Davis Thompson, for example, goes out there and has a ceiling performance, you're going to move up those leaderboards in a hurry. So I think a lot of your lineup construction talk and a lot of like your, 5th, maybe 6th man in talk, a lot of that comes down to the kind of contest that you're entering out there. So when you're building your player pool, when you're actually building lineups out there on DraftKings, just be very cognizant of the kind of contest that you're entering. If it's in cash, ownership shouldn't even be a part of your process. If you're just trying to beat like 50% of the field, then it should be all about trying to optimize your best fantasy projection. And by the way, if you want to know what I would do out there for cash, I would join the Gsluke Patreon, which of course is in the link of this video. I'll link in the description of this video, and I would run my projections on your optimizer. I would copy and paste my projections in, run the top optimal lineup, and that is exactly what I would play for cash. It'd be that simple. I usually don't play cash, but that's how simple the strategy can be. You just try and beat 50% of the field. You play the best plays out there in the cash format. GPPs, single entries, much different. It's all about nuance. It's all about how you're playing guys, not necessarily who you're playing. And hopefully it gives you a little bit of a taste for that. What do I do differently for 7 or 20 entry contests? So I've never entered a 7 entry contest. I didn't even know they had those, if we're being honest. But yeah, if I'm entering like a 20 max, that's something that I have a little bit more experience with. In a 20 max, I guess I just have a tighter player pool, right? 20 compared to 150 lineups, I'd have to take less players. So you still want to make sure you're having leverage on the guys that you're taking. But in 20 lineups, like maybe I have 30 guys for a 150 max pool. For a 20 lineup pool, I probably have like 18 players in my player pool, something around there, like give or take maybe 2 in either direction. That's the main difference. A lot stays the same. You're building lineups the same way. Those 20 max contests are pretty much just like large field GPPs, a bunch of entries. They're top heavy. You're trying to go out there and finish in the top 5. And you need to have leverage. You need to have differentiation in those kind of contests. The only difference is because you have less bullets, you're going to want to tighten up the player pool a little bit. So that's what I would say. If you're in those kind of contests, just you can't play everyone, right? Probably narrow it down to like 16 to 20 guys would be my recommendation there. All right, let's talk about some prop stuff now. So if you guys were just here for DFS, I still appreciate you guys stopping on by. Go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't already, and best of luck in all of those contests. Let's take down a GPP or two. Let's finish this week strong and get after it for the rest of the playoffs out here. But out here on the prop side of things, we've got an order of business to attend to. So looks like the second fight is about to start. I'm actually going to move my laptop here so I can watch it over here in the corner. And we're going to chill here on live stream. We'll watch the fight together. If you guys are watching it yourselves, I guess we can shoot the shit about it down in chat. And maybe if you have some UFC props, let me know too. I'm not a big UFC prop person. It's not my specialty or anything. But because of the payout multipliers and whatnot, maybe it's not a bad idea for us to try and mix in that sort of thing. So let's see. Is it going to kick me off Prize Picks again? It was doing it the other day. Hopefully not, because that was mighty fun and annoying for yesterday's live stream. All right, we'll come back to Prize Picks. Okay, we'll just do Underdog first. Prize Picks might not even have their board up quite yet, so that's all right. What I want to do before we actually go into these boards is bring up the averages from today. So just like yesterday, I do already have these calculated. I calculated the averages for the St. Jude just before the round actually ended. So I think the stroke average actually got like 0.01 shot better. Birdie average, bogey average might have moved ever so slightly, but these are essentially right to a 100th of a decimal place. So it played about 0.39 strokes under par. So that would be a 69.61 average. To go ahead and correct that, birdie average was 3.5 per round. Bogey average actually didn't move that much. Went from about 2.45 to about 2.65 per round. So went out about 0.2. The bigger difference was the birdie average. Birdie average went down about a half a birdie per round, which completely screwed me. The props today, the course in general played a whole lot harder. We already did a whole rant on that, so I'm not going to completely hit you guys with it again. But it was very unexpected. Not something that I thought was going to happen, but worth noting, and we'll talk about this here in a second, but I don't necessarily think it's going to play as hard for Sunday because it feels like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it felt like they used almost all their hardest pin locations today. So the birdie average might go slightly up. I mean, if I'm right about that narrative, it probably goes up to like 3.7 per round. This bogey average, maybe it stays in that same ballpark because they are going to have some dangerous pin locations out there on a Sunday. But rounds 1 and 2, it was pretty consistently at like 2.45 per round. So I'm hesitant to say what I really think is going to happen with this course just because I was so wrong about it today. And it humbles you a little bit, right? You go, okay, I guess I don't know as much as I think I do. But yeah, today I think even the players were probably very surprised with how hard the golf course was playing. If I had to give you my 2 cents out there on Sunday, I think it gets easier. I think rounds 1 and 2, where it played like a stroke under par, like 1.2, 1.3 strokes under par, I think it's going to be like in between that and then what we had for today. So maybe it's not quite as far under par just because it is a Sunday at, a playoff event. There's a lot of pressure out there, but something like 0.55 to maybe 0.75 shots under par is personally where I think it's going to come in. So again, it's not a perfect science. I get things wrong. You saw that today, right? Golf course played a lot harder than really anyone thought it was going to. But for Sunday, that's my 2 cents on it. We'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm wrong out there for tomorrow. The live golf stuff, I guess we'll cover that right now too. Here are the round 2 averages. It played easier than round 1. So it played about 0.7 shots easier out there for today. And then the birdie average went from about 4.1 out there for round 1 to about 4.67 per round, which if you compare this to the 2023 average was the exact same number. It was 4.67 per round for the 3 rounds last year. So it was pretty much, it played today like it did the year before. Now, the rough's a little bit longer this year. The live golf course was also firmer before they got that rain. But because of the rain they got during play in round 1, that's why it played so soft today. It's why it played so easy out there. And it's not expected to completely dry out quite yet. So I would think that for round 3, that these averages are probably pretty accurate and that it might get marginally harder just because the moving day setup was relatively straightforward for live today. But they don't ever have the pins as very difficult on the Live Tour. They like seeing scoring over there. They're not shy about saying that they'd rather see guys go out there and shoot like -6, -7, as it's more enjoyable and more entertaining out there for your casual golf fans. So I would expect to see a birdie average at least 4.5 per round. And then the stroke average, probably at least like 2.5 to 2.75 under par, which again, I know slightly quote unquote harder averages than what we had today, but most of that just because of the pin locations. Let me bring up our prop sites over here and let's find some value, shall we? And by the way, this fight over here, I am like glancing at it on the side. It's fucking crazy. They're like going, the pace that they're fighting at right now, it's Glenn and then Song Yadong, I think, that's fighting. It's just insane. Colin is losing over 5 strokes ball striking over the last 2 rounds. That's crazy. I've got to say that's probably going to come around at some point. You don't like to see that from Colin Morikawa, but he is going to be sub 10% owned out there in GPPs. So for prop purposes, a little bit too sketchy of a play for me to go out there and want to play myself. But he is the sort of player that if he does turn it around, has plenty of ceiling potential. We know that with how solid he's played this year, but is also the sort of guy that you can get a bunch of leverage on. So he's a risky play, but he's a really intriguing option in large field GPPs, just because if you use him to offset ownership from like a Hland, a Tony Finau, maybe it's a Xander or a Scotty Scheffler towards the top end of the board, you accomplish that, right? If you take one of those chalky guys, but then you use a Colin Morikawa, you're pretty much making up for all that ownership right there. So I definitely think there's a time and space for doing so. Let me refresh this. Let me see if they've added like birdie lines or anything like that, which they may not have yet. Be understandable this close to lock. And I do want to bring up DraftKings, FanDuel, and Caesars real quick, just to see if they've got some lines posted for us. Round 1 is over in that fight. Okay. I don't know who I'm rooting for. I think I have some Glenn. I think I may have both sides of that fight as well. I don't know who I have more of. I should. Let's see. Any lines on nothing on Caesars quite yet. Doesn't look like anything posted on FanDuel as of now. And let's see what we've got on DraftKings. Probably nothing. Yep. Nothing over there quite yet, which does mean that the Underdog board was posted before they got sportsbook lines, which could give us a little bit of value out there, right? This could be the kind of spot where these are off by half a stroke to a stroke because they didn't have them to compare to. So if we hang out here a little bit, maybe we can get them to update the board. That wouldn't be the worst idea. I'm trying to get this to load the board over here on Prize Picks. Goodness gracious, it's still giving me these issues. That is something else. Maybe if I click today's board like yesterday, whatever. Prize Picks is just a lost cause at this point with how buggy their software is. That's for damn sure. All right, where were we at? Will I have props if I purchase the props bundle for Underdog and Prize Picks? Yes, every single day. So yesterday, for example, I think we only had like 1 slip that we did here on the live stream. I had 10 slips for today. So yeah, there's a lot more that's always posted over there. And a lot of times I find a lot more value after we get off live stream because I'm actually able to run my projections. What we do here on the stream is I just try and find some of the obvious pieces of value. A lot of cases that are like compared to sports books, just better lines. What I do after the fact is I'll go through, actually run my own projections. I have my own projection software. I go out there and do that. And then I compare lines and I usually find a lot more. So yeah, that's how it works. And it's in the description. Do I have more picks on there for tonight? If you bought it right now, I don't have them up because we're just getting the boards like right now, right? Like Underdog hasn't even updated their entire board, but by the end of the night, you will. Yes. And I post them throughout the entire night. Like I'll be posting stuff probably 5 minutes after we get off live stream here, like the stuff that we talk about right here. And then the whole way through like 12 or 1 a.m. I'm posting shit. So there's gonna be a lot of stuff posted and it's posted as I enter it. Your insights are helped you on 6-man birdie on Prize Picks will def purchase. Yeah, glad to have you on board, man. Let me know if you need any help with signing up. I'm on there, by the way. There's a DM. There's a way that you can DM me on there. If you have any questions, you can do that as well. All right, let's go through this. So Prize Picks is being an absolute bummer right now. But looking through this, they've got these a lot higher, right? So like my first reaction is, we've got Scotty at 67.5 strokes. And I do think it's going to play a little bit easier. Now, the thing is like, what do the sports books think, right? So that's why I'm very interested to see like where DraftKings is going to price the board, where Caesars is eventually going to post these strokes lines. I don't think they're going to be as low as what they had him for today, but it wouldn't surprise me if like Scotty was 66.5 strokes over there, maybe juice towards the over or something like that. But like 67.5 feels like a pretty soft line. I wouldn't touch Rory with a 2-foot pole after his form the first few days, but like a Xander at 67.5, they've got a bunch of legit players on here. Let's see, 69 strokes even for guys like Tom Kim, Justin Thomas, Max Homa, probably another guy I wouldn't touch because of his form, but like a J-Day's playing pretty well. Like a Cam Young, actually, yeah, Cam Young's playing pretty shitty too. So maybe he's not like the best option. Even a Brian Harmon, he's like even par to this point. But guys that have kept it somewhat together. So like an Aaron Rye he's not in the best position, but he's like towards the middle of the leaderboard. A Tony Finau, for example, that's at like -1 here. These plays, I don't know if they're my favorite. I would like to see some sportsbook lines to make sure that they're value, but these are my initial leans right here. Like maybe even a Scotty, right? Like under 67.5. These are the kind of lines that I'll be looking at. So I'm trying to get this to load, guys. As you guys can see, it's just not cooperating with us here. Maybe let me try what I did yesterday. I brought up a new tab. I opened up Prize Picks and then I hit today's board. It worked. Okay, well, that didn't work. Okay, I got it to work that time. Okay, sweet. It doesn't look like we have a board posted yet, so it was in vain to try and get this to load. But at least it actually lets me look at the board now. We do have some live golf stuff that we can look at, so we'll do that here. So I'm going to leave these in the cart for right now. I'm hoping that maybe we get sportsbook lines to compare to here shortly. I was just brainstorming with those three. No idea if I'm going to end up playing them myself quite yet, but those are some of the first leans off the bat. So it does look like they do have some live golf stuff posted over here, and they've been copy and pasting the Prize Picks board, so I'm assuming it's going to be the exact same stuff. So just looking through this, the strokes board is about 0.5 strokes lower than what they had it for today. In fact, like guys like a Burmester, Sergio, Louis, for example, were all at 67.5 strokes for today. So they're all about 0.5 lower. And then the birdie lines over here, you can see are about 0.5 higher. So it's kind of unfortunate. There was a lot of value on the board, in my opinion, for overs on birdies because they had guys like Burmester, for example, like at 4.5 birdies. Burmester, by the way, didn't even go over his line today. I would have gone right back to it, even if they've posted it, but it's now at 5 birdies. So unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that they'd post the same board as round 2, because if they did, there was going to be a lot of value to mix in. So there could still be some spots that I think we can find for some value here, but we're going to have to be a little bit more choosy about doing so. And just to give you guys a few ideas right off the bat, like I guess we could use like this underdog stuff and get like 3x payouts over here. So the first one that kind of stuck out to me, where is he over here? I feel like the Prize Picks where they have like everything sorted by category is such an easier way to navigate than what they have over here on Underdog. Like I appreciate that everyone has their projections like under their name, but it does feel like a little bit annoying. Gooch went crazy. You love live. There's a Cam Smith in Kepket 5.5 birdies. Oh, it is raining? Let me check on that. I didn't see the rain in the forecast, but yeah, dude, if it rains overnight in White Sulphur Springs, that would be huge. Let's see. White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. And yeah, you're spot on, man. Let's see how much rain's coming down. 0.05 inches. So it's not going to rain that much, but it will help a little bit. That's a good call on that, my man. So let's see what we have got. 5.5 birdies, by the way, for like the elite tier players. I think I'd almost rather have their strokes line at that point. But if they were at 66.5, that would also feel a lot better. For them to be at 65.5 strokes is craziness out there for some of those top level players. But what I was looking at, I was got a little distracted there for a second. But maybe this Richard Bland under in strokes, where he has an average round and he would cover this if it plays to a -3 average. They have a few guys at 67 strokes that are used to gaining a bunch of strokes to the field over there on the Live Tour. Even like a Cameron Tringale, for example, he's been one of the top 15 shots gained per round players on all the Live Tour. All he has to do is have an average day, like what we saw for round 2, and he would win this. So, I don't hate that. Who was the other one? Right. This like Sergio, for example. Like Sergio Garcia does not make a bunch of bogeys. He's also played really well this week. Like at 67 strokes, like maybe that's not even the worst under. And Abraham Answer, another guy who's one of the top 10 shots gained players over there on the Live Tour. A Joaquin Niemann at -4. Like, sure, yeah, he's posted one stroke better than the field average, but he's a lot better than your field average player over there. A Dean Burmester at 67 strokes, I think you can say a lot of the same about. So I got to pick my favorite one. There's a lot of things on here I think that are decent leans. Let's try and narrow it down to just one bet. So Burmester's definitely in play. Bland is maybe my favorite option. We'll have to see here. And by the way, that fight, it's the Song Yadong fight versus, I think, Ricky Glenn. Was it third round? They're both bloodied up and everything. You love to see it. That's MMA at its finest right there. It looks like a high-scoring bout, too. It's a lot of, looks like a lot of action. I don't know if there's been any takedowns. Yeah, I think a takedown or two as well. We'll have to see how that one works out. All right, so we're going to take Richard Bland here, out here in this lineup, just because he would hit it -3. Also, he's got similar form to guys like a Burmester Answer. And just to show you what I'm talking about, I'll bring up his data golf profile for you guys. Bland has been like unbelievable this year. I mean, it's uncanny how solid this guy's form has been to this point. So this is probably just the easiest way to show you guys the form that he's had. But look at this, right, and all the shots gained into the green. He lost at Live Houston, but he lost 0.16 shots to the field. And then he lost back in Jeddah, which was back in March, right? Every other event. So what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of his last 12 events worldwide. Some of them are Live Tour. Some of them are Champions Tour events, which, by the way, the 2 Champions Tour events he played, he won both of those events. He's been into the green. So the fact that they have him at 67.5 strokes at a golf course, by the way, that he's in contention at this week, and he was top 3 at this event last year. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing in terms of the projection. Like, that one makes a whole lot of sense to me. So let's take that, and then we'll take this Scotty Scheffler under on strokes. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that one in right now myself over there on my side. But it's going to be these 2 projections. The Richard Bland one at 67.5. He essentially has a field average day to cover. And while I don't think -3 is going to be like an easy score by any means, if there's anyone to take to do that, it's Scotty Scheffler, right? Like I think that one's pretty self-explanatory on why he'd be my favorite option to go out there and do that. And because we're taking a PGA and a live prop right there, that's going to pay a full 3x payout. So that's at least the multiplier that I'm getting over there in Champions. There's no correlation between the 2 different events, so you're going to get a little bit of a boost there. So I've got it entered on that account. I've got to do one other thing here before we move on over there to Prize Picks. I'm not sure if we're going to get a board posted on Prize Picks before we end up getting off live stream here. But as I was saying to that one guy down in the live chat, if you guys want all the slips that I'm taking, all the exposure I'm getting to, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of the video. On there, of course, is also where I'm posting the spreadsheets that you see for all my Showdown content, but where you can get all the different prop exposure that I'm taking. So I'm trying to get some exposure to these 2 myself right now, so bear with me while I'm doing that. I am limited to shit on all of my accounts, so I'm not going to say anything that is giving away anything or self-incriminating, right? But yeah, I'm doing a few things over here. You can probably guess what I'm doing, right? All right, looks like we're good to go. All right, let's go over here to Prize Picks and see if we have a damn board yet. So we might not. If not, guys, I guess we'll do it based on the analysis over here. But what I'm guessing, and again, we don't have the sportsbook lines to compare to, so I'm just starting with Scotty, who I can almost guarantee is probably going to be a value for an under 67.5. These other guys on here, though, I'd be looking at the sportsbook odds. I have a sneaking suspicion that like even a Xander might be juiced for like his under at 67.5. And then I think that guys like a Tony Finau, right? I was pointing him out before. And then maybe the Sam Burns here at 69 strokes are the kind of guys that would also be decent odds towards the under. Now, until we see that, I'm going to wait, right? I'm not going to go out there and enter a whole bunch of exposure other than that one slip that we just entered there together. But I'm very curious to see what we're going to get here at the pricing. So I'm just checking these different prop sites to see if we've had anything posted. Let's see. Does Caesars have anything yet? So nothing quite yet. but they are starting to post some of these like par 3-4 winners, which means that they're close to getting these odds posted. One thing I've noticed, by the way, guys, is that the stat provider, the projections provider for all of these sites seem to be the same sort of site. So they end up being done by the same company, I'm assuming, and then they send it out to all these different sites, and then they'll adjust them a little bit, right? So you'll see like different odds between like FanDuel and DraftKings, and that's something that I like to point out. Let's send another one of these trolls out there to Banland. And by the way, guys, if you threw something down in chat, like as a smartass, I'm not even going to give you the time of day out here. I'm not going to bring your comment up. I'm just going to ban your ass and send you on your way. You guys are just pieces of shit, scumbag degenerates that out there and have to try and chirp people after trying to give you some advice, right? And like the guy I banned, by the way, I'll just say it. Like he said something about, oh, nice Rory play. Dude, yesterday I told you, pick the plays that you want to yourself, right? Just because I was using them doesn't mean you want to. Then you get these dog shit morons that come into my live stream and they go, oh, nice call on somebody. Like, yeah, nice job, dude. And you're sitting behind a computer, not saying absolute dick out there. So congrats, dude, on being an internet troll. If you want to join that guy, by the way, anyone out there, that debonair guy, by the way, was this guy's name, then do it. Make a comment like that. And you'll never make a comment again in my live stream. I really don't give a fuck. If you're going to be that kind of a degenerate scumbag, I'll send you on your way. Totally fine to do so. You don't have to be around here. What's going on, Antonio, though? Do I ever live bet top 5, top 10s? Unfortunately, Hard Rock doesn't offer those. So for the most part, I don't. When I'm using offshores, I'll look at them from time to time. I usually only like look at the top 5, top 10 markets, though, if it's on a guy that I actively want to target. So for example, like if I see somebody that the first 2 days maybe just made the cut on the number, but ball strikes the ever living shit out of it, in some cases, I'll try and find like their top 20 number, or a lot of times even their top 10 number to try and get them over the weekend. But yeah, Hard Rock, my main piece of exposure, it's the only legal book down here in Florida, unfortunately doesn't offer those. They close off that market after the first round. They do have a live odds market out there for outrights, but they are severely lacking it when it comes to certain markets. That would be one of them. They also don't have like round score props that they post for any certain slate. So definitely something that I try to stay away from a little bit. It's not like I try to, it's kind of have to, right? There's not a legal market out there to take advantage. So it kind of is what it is. Let's see who won this fight between Song Yadong and Ricky Glenn. It looks like a hell of a scoring out there. So yeah, it looks like Song Yadong won. And I'm pretty sure I had both in my exposure, but let's double check on that right now. We're winning money on our UFC stuff, so I guess that's great. But let's find this MMA exposure. There it is. All right, so the first fight, by the way, the Aguiar guy, yeah, had 35%. I had 35% of Nicole too, so that one was a little bit of a punt, right? 35% either direction. And then that was Song Kenon, so not Song Yadong, versus Ricky Glenn. Let's see. Ricky Glenn, I had a little bit. Look at that. I had 30% Kenon, and I had 28% Ricky Glenn. So, again, didn't really matter who won those first two fights I get, but at least I'm assuming he's got a decent score. I guess I should check the score of the first fight too, huh? Wouldn't be a bad idea. So first fight scored 91.68. Yeah, that's pretty sweet, especially for what, a $7,200 fighter. And then who was the other one? Did I not have any lineups with them together? So it's looking like it's going to be like 70 points for Kenan. So they obviously don't have the stuff from round 3 counted quite yet. I also didn't watch round 3, so I don't know how active he was out there, but I'm assuming he's probably getting at least like 15 to 20 points for round 3. Oh, it looks to get updated. So yeah, he's got a 76 score. That's actually not very ideal. At $8,700, that's not going to be it. So I'm glad, I guess I only had 30% of them, but at least he won. Help us out with a few min cashes at the very least. So look at that. Our patience has paid off. We have finally gone the board that I was hoping for. And like I said, when these sites post, usually the other ones follow suit rather quickly. FanDuel posted 2-ball props, and then strokes lines will be coming out shortly. Yep. Birdies are better lines are on FanDuel and strokes lines. Yep. Dude, it's like clockwork. Like I said, dude, this is how I know that this is a thing. They wouldn't post all at the same time unless they're pulling them from the same place, right? Unless they're getting them from their provider or whatnot and then going out there and doing that. So let's see what we've got. So I guess I don't see the birdie stuff yet. Let me see. Yeah, so I don't have birdie props myself yet. You might have them on your side, Antonio. So if you see those and you want to share a few of them down in live chat, Let me know what they have guys like Scotty at, and then let me know where guys like Tom Kim are, if you could, please. That would be huge. But let's take a look at these round score lines, which, by the way, I'm very curious to see where they have these. So let's go over here to Caesars first. Tommy Fleetwood, 68.5 and juiced under. Juiced under are most players here. Tony Finau's actually juiced over at 68.5. I did not expect to see that. I want to see where Scotty's at, huh? So Scotty, yes, 66.5. I called that one, right? He is juiced a little bit over, like I also told you guys. But yeah, definitely value for under at 67.5. And so good a few other ones on here. So Sam Burns also at 68.5, surprisingly juiced towards the over, which I guess I don't completely disagree with. But let me see what they have him at over here on FanDuel. So let's see where we've got Scotty Scheffler. So yeah, Xander is at 67.5, and he is close to even money. Victor Hovland is 67.5 and also close to even money. Where do we have guys like Scotty? So Tommy Fleetwood, he's closer to even money on FanDuel at 68.5. And where's Scotty Scheffler? So yeah, Scotty minus 140 for the over 66.5. Yeah, I definitely feel good about that prop line that we got then. So yeah, in terms of the sportsbook line value, it's there. Right? I pretty much told you guys I knew that was going to be the case. So yeah, let me know what you have on those lines. So Scotty under 4.5 is plus 130. So he's juiced way over 4.5. Okay. And he's minus 175 on that. Let's see what they post him at here in Underdog. Maybe they post him at 4.5 birdies. That would be a heck of a line to take. So yeah, nothing posted quite yet, but yeah, if we get a 4.5 birdie line on Scotty, you guys might want to consider that one. So I did want to see where they had Tommy Fleetwood in terms of his projection. So he is at 68.5. So maybe we would do something like this. Like try and obviously get the push equity with Tony Finau there at -1. You have some sportsbook line value, at least on Caesars, for somebody like a Tommy Fleetwood. Interesting, and definitely something to at least keep in mind. So make sure to check those guys out as the night goes on. So over there on my Patreons, where I'm going to be posting the rest of my exposure, guys, that is all I've got for this live stream. So over here on the Live Golf side, I've already told you guys that I think the lines are relatively soft. Probably some unders at 67 strokes that I'm going to be mixing in, and maybe even an over on birdies or two for some of these guys at 4.5 birdies. So I'll be doing that, especially when we get the PGA board over here, as we can take one prop from each site and end up getting a full 3x payout on that combination. So I'll be doing that, right, just as we did over here on the Underdog side. So yeah, maybe if I am just going to play like this Tony Finau, right, I try and find something on Live Golf to play with it. So that's how I'm going to be handling this sort of slate, and how I think you can go out there and do so yourself. Let me bring up pick 6. I do want to at least take a gander at the board. They have been really lacking lately with their boards. It looks like it's going to be a lot of the same with only 7 strokes lines posted. And yeah, that's a tough scene. And only 4 birdie lines posted. Forget it. Like I said yesterday, right? If they're going to give us a dog shit board, well, I'm just not going to play over there in pick 6. I'm not even going to waste my time showing off their product if they're going to give us 7 projections to work with. I mean, that is just, it's ridiculous. Like I know that I guess they can do what they can, but they posted way more for rounds 1 and 2 when people are watching less golf. Right? Like Thursday, Friday, people are working. It's not as big a deal, especially like Sunday at a playoff event on the PGA Tour. You would really think that DraftKings would step up and give you more plays, more guys to choose from on the weekend when there are more eyes on golf. And unfortunately, they hand us this dog shit. So, And cool, yeah, here's the Tom Kim line. So he's under -175, and then over is plus 130. That's pretty much exactly what I was expecting to see. So good to know. And yeah, when we get a birdie board, we'll be able to react to that. But that's all I've got for this live stream, though, guys. Hopefully, you guys feel a little bit more prepared for all of your exposure tomorrow. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And also go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. We'll have that course breakdown dropping tomorrow morning. Also, all the DFS and Showdown content throughout the week. So if you guys don't want to miss any of that when it drops, make sure to go ahead and smash that subscribe button. That's all I got, guys. Best of luck out there tomorrow, whether you're playing props, whether you're playing DFS. Go out there, make your boy proud. Ship It Nation, of course, great resource for all of those DFS needs. Code Luke10 will give you a discount off any membership on that side. And of course, for all my behind the scenes content, including what I have for DFS, the spreadsheet, make sure to check out the DFS tier over there on my Patreon page. And then of course, for all the props and whatnot, make sure to check out the prop tier. Link to that in the description of the video, and let's get after it. So enjoy these fights. Hopefully they go our way. We can take down a GBP with some UFC stuff and get on to next week.